Tonight, a dangerous 48 hours ahead for New South Wales with heavy rain to fall over flooded communities. Also tonight, a fatal crash claims the life of a 24-year-old man in Kaleen. The Treasurer tries to reset expectations ahead of Tuesday's federal budget. And Canberra's medical startups pushing traditional boundaries for treatment. Good evening, Dan Borscher with ABC News. Several communities across New South Wales are on high alert tonight, closely watching rising rivers and creeks. There are more than 120 warnings in place and thousands of people are being told to leave their homes. Rain is already falling over saturated catchments with floodwaters inundating homes, cutting roads and isolating communities.
From the top to the bottom, much of New South Wales is under threat or underwater.
What we are currently experiencing is more flood threats in more communities and locations than at any other time this year.
There are 122 flood warnings across the state, with rainfall in excess of 150 millimetres expected in some communities. In Moree, residents woke up to this: cattle drenched, crops destroyed, streets turned into rivers.
We're just getting rid of the dogs because the house has gone under.
Evacuation orders have been issued and supplies are arriving, with 150 emergency personnel setting up 2 camps to assist locals.
We're expecting a peak of 10.7 metres there this afternoon, which is higher than what they saw in March 21.
It's just scary how much more water we're going to get.
We're just praying that it doesn't get to the level that it gets to.
Evacuation centres have also been established in Deniliquin, Tamworth, Gunnedah and Moama on the Victorian border.
If there is an evacuation order in place, please do not wait for a knock at the door from the SES.
In Moama, locals are fearing a peak due tonight.
It's hard to say where the water may end up with the levies that they've made. It's obviously got to still go somewhere, so that could impact us even more.
With the swollen Goulburn River putting pressure on the Murray, the Mayor fears the area could be in further danger.
So all of that will mean that we need to continue to be on alert past any peak that might occur tonight, because there's probably another peak coming behind it.
The greatest fears are for the Lismore area, with the threat of a third devastating flood in 8 months. Up to 200 millimetres of rain across the Queensland border is threatening areas all the way down to Nambucca.
This system is producing a lot of rain, and this is a system that we're concerned about for the northern rivers.
Locals are hoping this time they're better prepared. Bruce McKenzie, ABC News, Lismore.
The ACT's road toll has risen to 18 after a fatal crash in Canberra's north overnight. A 24-year-old man from Flynn died at the scene of the crash in Kaleen about 10 p.m. The man was driving north on Maribyrnong Avenue when his ute left the road and hit a tree. His death brings the Territory's road toll to its highest number since 2010. Police say speed was a contributing factor in the crash and have urged drivers to slow down.
Our messaging isn't getting through at the moment. People need to take care on our roads. We're a community here. We can't do this alone.
Australians impatient for a real wage rise face a 2-year wait, according to the Federal Treasurer. In an interview with the ABC ahead of Tuesday's budget, Jim Chalmers has confirmed wage growth won't exceed inflation until the year after next at the earliest. Here's political editor Andrew Probyn.
With pictures of his wife and kids as inspiration, Jim Chalmers' moment of truth is just 48 hours away.
This will be a family-friendly budget which recognises that our pressures on the economy come from around the world, but they're felt around the kitchen table.
A fine sentiment, but hard to deliver when inflation is so painfully high.
On the current Treasury forecasts, inflation will persist for longer than we'd like.
Expected to peak at 7.75% in December, inflation will average 5.75% over the current financial year and 3.5% the following year.
Wages growth, which is beginning to happen in our economy, will cross over with inflation sometime, we think, the year after next.
But that effectively means that Australian workers will be going backwards for another 2 years, doesn't it?
We've been upfront about what's happening with real wages.
Labor's promise to lift wages was a big part of its election campaign earlier this year, as was tackling cost of living pressure. And while Tuesday's budget will forecast a massive $33 billion increase in inflation-linked welfare payments over the next 4 years, 2/3 in age pension and job seeker payments, there won't be relief beyond Labor's existing pledges on cheaper childcare and medicines and fee-free TAFE.
Our responsibility when we've got lots of inflation is not to spray money around in an indiscriminate or untargeted way, because that would make our inflation problem worse.
The opposition having somewhat of an each-way bet.
You've got to be cautious not to have spending proposals that fuel additional inflation.
It just seems that this government doesn't have a plan to deal with cost of living pressures.
One awkward feature of Jim Chalmers' budget story on Tuesday will be explaining why a $100 billion windfall from high commodity prices won't be used to ease cost of living pressure. Instead, the extra cash, caused in large part by the war in Ukraine, will be banked so inflation doesn't worsen. Whichever way you look at it, households and workers face at least a couple more years of pain. Andrew Probyn, ABC News, Canberra.
Boris Johnson has touched down in London after racing home from a holiday to consider an audacious bid to return as Prime Minister. The race for the top job looks to be firming as a contest between Johnson and his former Finance Minister, Rishi Sunak. Correspondent Steve Kinane has been following developments from London, where he joins us now. Steve, which of the frontrunners have got the most support?
Well, Dan, to even get on the ballot paper, they need to come up with 100 nominations from their fellow Tory MPs. So far, it looks like former Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, has about 120 plus backers. Boris Johnson, well, his supporters are suggesting he's met that 100-vote threshold already, but only around 50 MPs have declared that they're backing him. So there's a suggestion from the Sunak camp that they may be fudging those figures at the moment. Penny Mordaunt, the Leader of the House, who's the only candidate so far to actually formally declare they are running, she has around 20 voters. Now, we do know that Sunak and Johnson had a meeting last night. We don't know the details of that meeting, whether they were trying to strike some kind of deal or not. What we do know is tomorrow is the deadline, 2 p.m. on Monday here in London. They need to get their nominations in. Now, if more than one candidate has more than 100 nominations, it will go to a runoff to the party members, and there's around 200,000 Tory party members, and they will then get a vote for the final candidate. If there's only one candidate who meets that threshold, that means tomorrow we will find out who is the next British Prime Minister.
Oh, an interesting day tomorrow. Steve Kinane reporting from London. China's leader Xi Jinping has secured an unprecedented third term, cementing his place as the country's most powerful ruler since Mao Zedong. In an extraordinary closing day of the Communist Party's National Congress, Mr. Xi unveiled a new cabinet stacked with loyalists, paving the way for him to remain leader for life.
Not a new leader, but in the eyes of some, a new emperor.
I was re-elected as the General Secretary of the CPC Central Committee.
A norm-breaking third five-year term, Xi Jinping's rise to unrivalled power in modern Chinese history has exceeded all expectations. And a sign of just how much he's conquered the world's most powerful political party, he today unveiled a top cabinet completely stacked with loyalists.
Confronted with new challenges and tests on the journey ahead, we must remain on high alert, like a student sitting for a never-ending exam. Comrade Li Qiang.
Among the new faces, a new deputy Li Qiang, a man who presided over the draconian Shanghai lockdown this year that saw families separated and food shortages. Personal loyalty to Xi now appears to trump everything else. As the new leaders emerged, they've tried to quietly hose down speculation about why former President Hu Jintao was manhandled out of the closing ceremony. State media says he was unwell, but others wonder if the undignified exit symbolised the demise of Mr. Hu's faction and the triumph of Xi. Either way, it's China's struggling economy that Mr. Xi is finding the hardest to deal with as he starts another term.
The Chinese economy has great resilience. Its strong fundamentals will not change.
In securing an historic third term, Xi Jinping becomes one of the most powerful Chinese leaders since the days of Chairman Mao. And with no obvious successor unveiled today, he can probably stay in office as long as he likes. With more control, he can be more ambitious. And there's no greater ambition for a Chinese leader with history on his mind than taking control of the island of Taiwan. Turbulent times ahead. Bill Birtles, ABC News, Taipei.
Russia has launched massive new strikes targeting Ukraine's power grid, causing blackouts around the country. With the war about to start its 9th month and winter approaching, the potential for freezing misery is looming. In villages Russian troops have abandoned to Ukrainian forces, residents are slowly taking stock of what will be needed to rebuild their lives. Correspondent Greg Jennett has toured some of these pillaged towns in eastern Ukraine.
Light wooden structures to begin with, traditional houses stood no chance. They cracked, crumbled and burnt once Russian forces swept in. Only now, in a trickle, are owners making their tentative return. The higher they stood, the heavier the targeting of homes. In Arkhangelskoye, mortar and rockets blew out through both sides of a building Russian soldiers took in a tyranny. From their vantage point, they had overwatch. And with their position, Anatoly tells us, came a ruthless reign of power.
They conducted interrogations, beat people, and when our Ukrainian army began to beat them, they went berserk.
In time, the Russians were outgunned, ground down, burnt out, across ground that not long ago housed hundreds of fighters. The signs of the invading army's hasty retreat are littered everywhere, stricken vehicles and empty trenches almost untouched since the day they fled. The living remain, although the living isn't easy. Handouts make a difference, and they'll have to, until the last vestiges of war are gone, and vibrancy and commerce may refill the void.
We rely heavily on humanitarian aid now. What we went through was very difficult.
To the percussive blast of frontline fighting just over there, this area is now very much under Ukrainian control. It's been liberated, in other words, but witnessing the damage, the question soon arises, liberated from what? Russian occupation, yes, but not from its legacy of lives to be spent in rubble and in ruins, perhaps for years. Greg Jennett, ABC News, Arkhangelskoye.
Afghans who worked for the Australian Defence Force say they and their families are being targeted by the Taliban to punish them for helping its foreign enemies. They say some people are facing execution and want the federal government to urgently help them come to Australia.
An ominous letter from Afghanistan's new rulers has been sent to the families of Afghans who worked for the Australian Defence Force. Your sons worked as interpreters with the infidels, the Australian forces, and many of our mujahideen have been martyred due to their spying, so our Islamic Emirate has decided to take its revenge. Former ADF interpreters in Australia say the Taliban, now secure in its rule, is hunting those who help the coalition and their families.
They're running to save their lives every day. They have to change their residential address every 2 to 3 weeks, maximum 4 weeks.
Some interpreters and families managed to leave Afghanistan after the Taliban takeover, but remain stranded in third countries like Pakistan.
We are facing security threats a lot. Even we have received death threats, and there are threats from every side for us. This is because we have worked shoulder by shoulder with the Australian Defence Force.
Some Afghanistan veterans say the new government has done more to help interpreters and their families reach safety, but many people are now at increased risk.
We have seen a number of interpreters arriving here in Australia. We've seen families reunited, but we need to focus on those interpreters and their extended family that may be remaining in Afghanistan.
More than 200,000 Afghans have applied for protection in Australia, and there's a huge visa processing backlog. In a statement, the government said it was prioritising former ADF staff and their families who are outside Afghanistan because it's too difficult to help those still in the country. Eric Twacek, ABC News.
New South Wales will join the ACT when it brings into effect a ban on single-use plastic items next week, including straws and plates. However, as people adjust to the changes, there are calls for a nationally consistent plan on the bans to reduce confusion for business.
Diving deep for debris. The Environment Minister joined a clean-up effort at Manly ahead of a statewide ban on single-use plastics.
And that's just a couple of minutes, so you can imagine what's out there up and down the coastline of New South Wales.
From the 1st of November, single-use plastics, including straws, cutlery, bowls and plates, will be banned.
This is a great outcome for the environment. It's a great outcome for businesses, and it's something that citizens across New South Wales have been asking for.
The government says the measures will stop almost 2.7 billion items of plastic litter from entering the environment over the next 2 decades.
Without question, if you stop the single-use plastic here, then it doesn't get into here.
Some businesses have already started implementing the changes.
This shop where uses always paper bags and biodegradable cups.
It wasn't all that difficult for us to come across. The product's there, it's available for everyone to buy now.
Businesses that don't comply face fines of up to $55,000, which increases to more than $200,000 if the matter goes to court.
Last week, states and territories agreed to develop nationally consistent definitions of single-use plastics. But the peak retail body says that doesn't go far enough.
We're really calling for time for a national plan with an agreed timeline that's consistent around Australia for some of these really key sustainability goals.
With several other states yet to introduce a similar ban, it's a timeline that remains uncertain. Husni Shams, ABC News, Sydney.
From virtual reality to smartphone apps, Canberra's medical startups are pushing traditional boundaries for treatment. Technology, not pharmacy, is helping people recover from chronic conditions in new ways.
VR can make getting better seem virtually real. Taking you somewhere your body can't, or reaching for the skies, Canberra startup Recovery VR is giving patients a new outlook.
The secret sauce of virtual reality is the immersion. People reach further and extend their arm and move their wrists more because they're in somebody else's body. It's a beautiful thing.
Driven by medical research, games are developed in-house and brought to the patient at home.
If we get virtual reality into a stroke survivor's life straight away, it's going to increase their abilities for the rest of their life.
Tina's startup, Brain Changer, takes a different high-tech approach. Chronic pain sufferers can reach for a smartphone app instead of a pill packet.
Chronic pain is the result of a series of changes to your nervous system. And the only reason those changes are possible is because as humans, we are bioplastic. So that's the road into chronic pain, but it's also the road out.
Brain Changer helps to remap those parts of the grey matter that tell a person they're in pain. The app suggests, prompts and measures activities like exercise and mindfulness to counteract painful tasks.
So a combination of things that they need to do, anything that's going to be challenging for them and likely to cause a flare-up, get them to match them up with 2 or 3 of these cues that allows them to change and dial down pain.
Again, from pain. James Viver, ABC News, Canberra.
Now to tonight's special report. When a man was found dead in the West Australian outback in 1979, police were quick to suspect a man who'd been caught sleeping with the victim's wife. That man, Percy Brown, was jailed for murder, but he says he's innocent and that he was forced to confess. Now he wants to clear his name.
Returning to Fitzroy Crossing stirs mixed emotions in Percy Brown. It's his country and the place of his people, but it's also where he was charged with a murder he insists he didn't commit.
I'm innocent from that day.
Couldn't they finish interviewing me and forcing me to do that? To right now where I'm sitting.
On the banks of the Fitzroy River in 1979, a man was found dead here. Just hours earlier, Percy had been caught sleeping with the victim's wife.
I was running away before he might hit me or kill me.
So you thought he was going to kill you?
Yeah. I ran down there, got across the creek there, going up on the other side and keep on Yanjua.
Police focused their attention on the then 20-year-old Walmajari man, and Percy says he was pressured to sign a confession.
I was interviewed all day. I would keep on saying no, 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 until they got that detective from Canada, and after they were threatening me.
Percy spent 5 long years in prison, but many still doubt that he should have.
He was very soft-voiced, and softly spoken, reticent, whispered, hard to get a word out of him, and shy, and I didn't think he had it in him.
Retired District Court Judge and former WA Prisoners Review Board Chairperson Alan Fenbury was his defence lawyer, and he says language was often a barrier for accused Indigenous men like Percy.
It was very difficult to know whether the accused really appreciated they had a right to silence. And I've often thought, this bloke doesn't have a clue what a confession is or a caution. And that was a frustration, professional frustration, continually in these cases.
The prosecution's case was also based on some footprints at the crime scene. Mr Fenbury believes that was insufficient, a point he made at court at the time, questioning, is there any other scientific evidence that you know of that connects this man with the killing? To which the detective answered, no. The local community had also raised concerns about the conviction at the time. As a young journalist, Steve Hawke witnessed the resistance firsthand.
They'd undertaken their own investigations in terms of Aboriginal law, and they told me that another man had done it, and that man was now being punished under the Aboriginal law.
Percy now works for the courts as a Creole translator, helping other First Nations people navigate the system.
My family, we are black, the Australian people, to help them, you know? That's my job.
He now wants his case revisited and ultimately overturned, and a lot of the community backs him.
If people are being wrong done by and being accused of things and sent to jail, of course you've got to try and find a way of healing.
Percy says it's an issue that's bigger than himself.
Yeah, because not only me, there's a lot of same thing will happen to a lot of Aboriginal people.
WA Police wouldn't comment on this particular case, but the force has previously apologised for its treatment of Indigenous people in the past. It says things are now improving.
There's always work to be done, but look, I've seen over the last 5 years we've definitely made headway.
For now, Percy holds out hope that the many questions that have haunted his life for more than 40 years can finally be put to rest. Jessica Hayes, ABC News, Fitzroy Crossing.
Australian captain Aaron Finch has admitted last night's heavy loss to New Zealand was a big setback to his team's T20 World Cup title defence. New Zealand thrashed Australia by 89 runs in the first game of the Super 12s, leaving the host nation in danger of missing the semi-finals.
New Zealand hadn't won a game in Australia in 11 years, but broke the drought in stunning fashion.
And that is a good old-fashioned hiding.
That's a big loss in the context of the tournament. We were just totally outplayed in all 3 facets. That hurts our net run rate.
Only the top 2 teams from the group of 6 will make the semi-finals, leaving Australia on the back foot already.
We've got England and Sri Lanka to get the better of in this group. It's going to be hard work. We're going to earn it if we get there.
Openers Finn Allen and Devon Conway launched an assault on Australia's bowlers.
What a start.
The Black Caps set the hosts a hefty 201 for victory.
They've had the momentum all innings.
Australia's batting lineup, filled with powerful strikers, couldn't build partnerships. And the overlooked Steve Smith was helpless on the bench.
They never got any rhythm. They never got any momentum going. Steve Smith would have provided that for them at one end.
The Black Caps have a history of lifting for World Cup games,
and got their campaign off to a flying start.
Oh, you've got to be kidding me, Glenn Phillips. Please. How good is that? They are well and truly up for this.
The fielding standard was also high in Perth as England beat Afghanistan by 5 wickets.
Brilliant catch! Livingston's made a wonderful take. He's covered a lot of ground, launched himself.
After making it through qualifying.
Oh yes, oh yes!
Sri Lanka thrashed Ireland by 9 wickets and could be a scary prospect for Australia on Tuesday. Duncan Huntsdale, ABC News.
It's being hailed as arguably the best moment of the Rugby League World Cup. Tournament newcomers Jamaica were put to the sword by New Zealand, but still found reason to celebrate as they crossed for their first ever World Cup try.
They've got a result! They've got a result! It's there for Jamaica!
This try in the dying minutes will go down as one of the highlights of the Rugby League World Cup.
Hold the front page on the Jamaican Post! There's your front page story! Jamaica, first ever try!
Outclassed 68-0 to New Zealand, 300-gamer Ben Jones-Bishop scored Jamaica's first ever tournament try.
And it goes to one of their greats.
Celebrated with a guard of honour, the fullback hailed the milestone as surreal.
It meant a lot. I don't have many words, to be honest. Yeah, it's just a great feeling.
I mean, you couldn't have written a better script, except a Jamaica win, of course.
Dallin Watene-Zelezniak equalled the record of 4 tries scored by a Kiwi in a World Cup match.
He has a hat-trick in 18 and a half minutes.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's World Cups don't come around very often, so to be able to be in another one and be in a quarter-final, it's special.
Earlier, England ran away with a 42-18 victory over France.
Sit back and delight at an athlete in full flight. Dom Young, absolutely brilliant.
Putting the hosts on top of Group A with 2 wins from 2 games. Parramatta Eels winger Mike Acevo's second-half double helped Fiji notch up its first triumph.
Seaboy's just too big, too strong, one-on-one.
Thrashing Italy 60 points to 4, their clash closing with another touching moment. As the Fijians hope for a win against Scotland to keep their World Cup dream alive. Chloe Hart, ABC News.
To weather, and with the incredible volume of rain about, you've shared so many of your views of our wet landscape. Suzanne Davey shared this particular view of the Murrumbidgee in-flooded Canberra pool today. Many thanks for sharing that one, Suzanne. And if you've got a view of Canberra or our region, send in a high-resolution landscape view like this one to the email address at the bottom of the screen, canberraweatherpics@abc.net.au. There was 31 millimetres at the airport overnight and 0.4 of a millimetre today, while Tuggeranong saw 15.6 millimetres overnight and another 1.4 millimetres of rain today. Almost 49 millimetres fell in Nowra overnight, 42 millimetres in Ulladulla and 21 millimetres of rain in Braidwood. There was 45 millimetres in Brisbane overnight, more than 2 millimetres today. Adelaide has seen 7 millimetres of rain today, isolated showers in Sydney. A low pressure system and trough over New South Wales is combining with the high pressure system near New Zealand to direct a humid tropical air mass across the state. This pattern is bringing showers, rain areas and thunderstorms as it slowly moves towards the east. A mass of middle-level cloud lies over Victoria, southern New South Wales, southeastern South Australia and most of Tasmania. Thunderstorms are forecast in Brisbane tomorrow. Showers are expected in Sydney, Melbourne, Hobart and in Perth. Widespread showers and thunderstorms clearing the far west later in the day. Some thunderstorms may become severe across the central and northern inland, with locally heavy falls leading to flash flooding and gusty winds are possible. 15 to 25 millimetres of rain is forecast here in the capital tomorrow with a top of 19. Sunrise at 6:05 and will set at 7:30. Ahead, 6 to 15 millimetres of rain is forecast on Tuesday, up to 1 millimetre expected on Wednesday and Thursday, partly cloudy on Friday and Saturday before more showers are on the cards. And that's the latest from the Canberra newsroom. I'm Dan Boris. Thanks for your company. Great to have you along. Yara, good night.